to articulate what life was like for 37 days while we searched and prayed for my brother's return cannot be done. Every single day for 37 days, I made social media posts with DJ's picture, asking for any information that would lead us to him. For 37 days, we cried in anguish as we hoped for his return. For 37 days, this animal, Baskerville, knew full well where he discarded my brother's lifeless body and had no regard, not a single care for the pain and suffering his cowardly actions were causing our family. I'm sure even today, as he sits there looking pitiful, that he does not care in the least. He has shown absolutely no remorse because he swears he's innocent. Up until that day, that Travun Baskerville decided to take the cowardly way out of an already bad situation. In addition to my husband, my brother was my confidant, my support, my protector, my go-to guy. The brother I could count on no matter what. We argued, we fought, it didn't matter. He was there for me. We spent afternoons together, chit-chatting about nothing and everything. He had regular play dates with my then 6-year-old daughter, who looked forward every Tuesday to Uncle DJ's arrival at her school to pick her up for the day. They had plans to spend every Tuesday with just her. 26 years of his life, he was Uncle DJ to my oldest daughter, who adored him. He was her funko, the fun uncle. Only being 16 years, her senior, they were very, very close. His murder has forced me to live an unfamiliar life, forced me to be someone I barely recognized, forced me to take medication in order to get a full night's rest, forced me to try to put on a happy face so my now 7-year-old will be okay. I've been forced to live with the awful, awful imagination of how his life ended so tragically. I'm forced to deal with my nightmares of how Baskerville decided to go to Myers after just having murdered my brother in cold blood. I'm forced to imagine the pain and agony my brother must have suffered by the gunshot wounds. I'm forced to wonder how long he lay in his own blood and feces until Baskerville and his accomplice decided to drag him from the house and throw him away like yesterday's trash. Put him in a garage and securely close it down and walk away. After my baby brother was found, I was then forced to imagine on a daily basis how his lifeless body laid in that trash can and decayed to the point of no recognition, to the point that the medical examiner required us to identify him using a TV monitor, using the tattoos on his body that he loved. DJ was a much-loved brother, uncle, cousin, nephew. He was the life of the party. He was at every family function, even when he was too tired from working to be there. And he would much rather have been home sleeping. He was there for us. His life dream and goal was to get a banquet hall. We worked together as a family to make the business successful. Because of Travun Baskerville's selfish and reckless decision to take my brother's life, he would never realize that dream, and we're forced to live life without him. I will forever be saddened that his dream will never come to fruition. His selfless attitude, his sweet demeanor, his loving spirit to help those in need will forever be gone, and no one got a chance to tell him goodbye. I'm also saddened by so many losses that will be experienced because of Baskerville's cowardly act. My daughters will marry someday, and Uncle DJ is expected to play a grand part in those events. He's supposed to be standing around with his chest poked out, with that ever-present smile on his face. My son and my youngest daughter will graduate from college, and Uncle DJ will be missed again. I'll never have nieces or nephews of DJs to shower with my love and affection, or birthday, Christmas gifts. I'll never get to gaze into their eyes and revel at how much they look like their daddy or how much they act like him. Because of Baskerville's selfish, careless decisions to shoot my brother in cold blood for no other reason than his manhood was challenged, I lost some of my own identity. That of being DJ's big sister. That was a role I thoroughly enjoyed. Making his presence, I find that I'm not as sociable as I once was, because I know DJ won't be walking through making his presence known. I'm not as lively as I once was. I'm depressed and sad most days. I missed our text messages, our random text messages. I love you, baby brother. I love you, sis. Just because. I miss being able to call and ask a simple question. What am I missing in this shrimp recipe? How can I fix this steak better? I struggle at work every day. His pictures hang in my cubicle. I'm stop what I'm doing just to focus on him and have a quick chat. I'm not real productive at work. And for the rest of our lives, we'll have family gatherings, birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, celebrations, once joyous and festive occasions now ruined because DJ is missing. His chair is empty. Yeah, we're able to smile and laugh together without DJ's presence, but there are many, many moments punctuated by thoughts of who should be here smiling and laughing with us. His many fabulous stories that he shares with my 7-year-old are forever missing. We'll light a candle in his memory. His ashes lay on my dining room buffet and often around my neck in an effort to feel his spirit close to me. We have ashes because we had to have him cremated. I have held my daughter as she wept with indescribable pain for the life of her uncle, helpless to do anything except weep with her. I've watched this same daughter, who graduated from college last spring, and Uncle DJ was present and very, very proud. I've watched her become withdrawn and sad, where she was otherwise very happy and proud of her accomplishment. This loss has caused her to lose her enthusiasm and love for her craft of teaching as she misses her uncle, and he was there when it all began. I've watched my husband hold back tears so as not to upset the rest of the house as he mourned the loss of his only little brother, his best friend. There will be no more quick stop-bys just to chat or to check on each other as they often did. No more conversations about life and their dreams and aspirations for our family. Baskerville's insensitivity to human life has forced my husband to be stronger than any man needs to be in this situation. As the man of our house, his job is to protect us from pain and misery. Baskerville, you forced him to grieve privately and internally That hasn't been healthy for him. My husband's physical health has also suffered during this process. He was scheduled for corrective surgery in June when the defendant and his accomplice were both well aware of where they put my brother's defenseless body, but decided to keep that knowledge to themselves, thereby causing us to put off a much-needed medical procedure, and he's still suffering from that. DJ's death has necessitated us doing things that I would never wish anyone would have to do. My husband and my cousins packed his belongings from our family home, sorting through his belongings, his mail, his private papers, pictures, and other private materials safe and feeling that they were invading and violating his privacy. We made phone calls and had visitations with pastors and television interviews, our family prayer vigils. We had prayer vigils to try and soothe our hearts and minds as we waited for the police to locate my brother's missing body. Because Baskerville and his accomplice made the decision to throw my brother away like trash, our family was robbed of the traditional final demise afforded those whose family members pass away. Therefore, we were also forced to be creative with regards to his memorial. I wrote his obituary, something a big sister shouldn't have to do. This task caused me excruciating pain and anguish that will haunt me forever. No one made me write the obituary or seek out the funeral home with which we would work to ensure his memorial service was smooth and respectful. No one asked my husband to locate a place to scatter DJ's ashes, but it was something we did out of a deep love for my brother. However, I am resentful and mad as hell that the defendant's actions forced me to be in the positions to have to do these things so early in my life and DJ's life, for that matter. We lived less than 5 miles from where my brother was murdered in Brightmoor, and I refused to travel that area. I've avoided West Island Drive in that area since I was advised of his murder location. In the past, that area was a route I drive to get to many locations, but I likely will never drive that route again for the rest of my life. My stomach turns, I get nauseous, my palms begin to sweat, and I get a pounding headache whenever I'm close to that area. I live with the thought of DJ dying on the floor of that raggedy-ass house alone while I was home sleeping soundly. Since DJ's murder, I wake in the middle of the night with a total sadness in the pit of my stomach. The pain is the way I start each and every day. Never will I forgive Travun Baskerville for murdering DJ in cold blood and taking our brother, uncle, cousin, and friend from us. I'm pissed for all that you have taken away and for causing our family so much unnecessary pain, all because of $50. And my brother challenging your scrawny little manhood by offering to handle the matter outside like men, if that's really what happened. Clearly, DJ was the only man in the room. No, he'll never feel any remorse. He'll never care. He'll never care to the extent of the pain he caused us. I watched him on the news when the judge was reading his charges, and he didn't flinch when murder was read. He only seemed perplexed when the charges of sex trafficking. I feel like that speaks to his nonchalant attitude as it relates to the murder. Regardless of the disagreement that was between Alexis and DJ, DJ was unarmed. He would never physically harm a woman and didn't pose a life threat to this coward, Baskerville. Yet he thought it was necessary to murder my brother rather than simply asking him to leave the house. It takes a cold-blooded, heartless person to murder someone over $50. And while I know criminals have murdered for much less, DJ didn't deserve to die and then be trashed away. trash the way this coward chose for him. When my 7-year-old heard that a verdict had been reached and that this person that murdered her uncle was going to prison, she asked me to tell him, and I quote, "Tell him he's dumb. I hope he goes to jail forever, and I hate him. Your Honor, my family prays that you see the senseless act of murder as it is and decide to give this habitual criminal the maximum penalty allowed by the law. No amount of time is sufficient for us, and none of this will bring my brother back. But he needs to sit and think. He needs to suffer. He needs to be punished for what he did. Knowing that he is off the street and he can't harm anybody else will help us to start some healing. It's going to be a long road." Thank you.
You're welcome. The other complainant wishes to address the purpose. And then I asked that the media not publish her face. Somebody again?
Yeah, again.
Yes. I think they can black it out like he did. They when she goes there. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you please spell your first and last name for the record?
Alexis Bhar.
You may.
I said I have learned so much from dealing with someone like you. This situation really changed my life. Thinking back on every single thing you put me through, I am surprised I made it this far. My life was revolved around you and controlled by you. I don't understand how you're able to sleep at night knowing that you put somebody in a situation like this. I look at all the old marks you put on me, from my forehead to my eye. It is unbelievable. This really took a toll on my life. I went from needing therapy to starving myself to self-harm. As of today, I am still trying to recover from this. I am not trying to be controlled again by no one. I was able to graduate high school and work a regular job and take care of my son the right way. When you was in my life and the way you controlled me, I would not be where I am today. You would have continued to take and control from me. You only thought about your happiness and not thinking about how I felt giving myself away for money. That was not the life I wanted to live. That was not the life I wanted to live. That was the life you wanted me to live. I am honestly happy I don't have to deal with your craziness anymore. Now I'm really starting to see what life is all about.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No.
All right. Ms. Logan?
I believe that's all of the impact statements.
All right, what would you like to say on the, okay, let's talk about the guidelines then. All right, PRV 1 is scored at 0. Is that accurately scored?
Yes.
Correct.
PRV 2 scored at 5. Is that accurate?
Accurate.
I have PRV2 scored at 30 points.
Tell me more.
No, actually, my form says 30 points.
For PRV,
2.
oh yeah, I'm sorry, OV2 is 5. PRV2 is scored at 30 points. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Accurate.
PRV3 scored at 10 points. Is that accurate?
Agreed.
PRV 4 scored at 0. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Agreed.
PRV 5 scored at, and 6 scored at 5 points. Are those accurate?
No, they both should be scored at 10 points.
Okay.
Defense agrees.
All right. PRV 7 scored at 20 points. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Defense agrees.
All right, so that means his PRVs are 80,
Yes.
but that's still an E, right?
Yes.
No, it's an F. It makes it an F. For murder in the second degree.
It's an F.
All right, offense variable 1 scored at 25 points. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Agreed.
Offense variable 2 scored at 5 points. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Agreed.
Offense variable 3 scored at 50 points. Is that accurate?
Inaccurate.
Should be 100.
No, 25.
Okay, tell me more.
As it relates to scoring OV3, in the matter of a homicide, we cannot score 100 points. The most you can score is 25.
Okay, so you agree to the reduction?
I do.
Mr. Longstreet?
I do.
Offense variable 4 scored at 0 point psychological injury to the victim, and this is what you believe should be 0, correct?
No, it's 15. It's 5. Psychological injury to the family.
Oh, okay, offense variable 4,
Should be 0 for this offense.
well, but for the human trafficking,
I scored it for the human trafficking.
okay. For the human trafficking, it should be 10,
Yes.
but for this offense, 0.
Yes.
All right, and for offense variable 5 is scored at 0, you believe it should remain 0.
That's correct.
Ms. Logan?
And I believe it should be scored at 15 points. The court has heard from several members of Mr. Calhoun's family as well as Ms. Baker, who is a listed victim in this matter, and both have indicated how Mr. Baskerville's actions have completely and drastically altered their lives. As it relates to Mr. Calhoun's family, Ms. Phillips testified that she wakes up every day with this pain and with
I'm
this
sorry, hold
absence.
on. Dawn, can you make a copy of this? Because I have to score for the other things too. You may continue, I'm sorry.
She wakes up with this pain and this absence. Her husband suffers in silence in an effort to be strong for her. Her daughters suffer, and that is what OV5 speaks to. It speaks to a traumatic and psychological injury to the family, and I believe 15 points should be scored.
Mr. Longstreet, do you wish to make further argument, or you just rest on your position? That
Rest on the position that shouldn't be scored. There's no actual evidence of psychological injury.
All right, I'm gonna, over the defense objection, I'm gonna score offense variable 5 for the murder in the second degree at 15 points. I'm trying to score for both offenses at the same time. All right, offense variable 6 should be scored at 25 points.
That's accurate.
Offense variable 7, aggravated physical abuse, scored at 0.
Accurate.
Accurate.
Offense variable 8, exportation or captivity.
Accurate. 0.
Should be 0.
What about for the human trafficking offense?
We would totally disagree with that scoring. We believe she was there voluntarily.
Offense variable 9, number of victims.
I believe offense variable 9 should be scored at 10 points for 2 victims of crimes against a person.
We would say it was 1 victim.
That's interesting because for each offense, there's only 1 victim, I think. If I'm scoring it for murder in the second degree,
Well, Your Honor, according to offense variable 9, 10 points should be scored when 2 to 9 victims were placed in danger of physical injury or death. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's for that specific sentencing offense.
okay, so you know what? Here's why I believe offense variable 9 should be scored at 10 points. Because there's 1 victim that was placed in danger that nobody has seemed to talk about, and that's the minor child. The minor child who was left home alone while the body was moved, while they went shopping in Meyer, while gunfire was taking place right in close proximity to where the child was sleeping. And so I think offense variable 9 should be scored at 10 points for both offenses. I don't think that requires me to engage in judicial fact finding, but I think it was clear testimony on the record that there was a minor child, infant, who was left home alone, which I think places that child in danger. So, offense variable 9, I'm scoring at 10 points. With your position, duly known and preserved. Offense variable 10, exploitation of a vulnerable victim.
0, accurately scored.
As it relates to all counts or just the homicide count? Because I believe it should be 10 points for the homicide.
So, I think it should be 15 points. And I think the reason why I think it should be 15 points is because when you look at predatory conduct, it's pre-offense conduct directed at a victim for the primary purpose of victimization. And I think that the ads, there was testimony that there were ads that were made and directed at Mr. Baskerville's direction in order to lure for the homicide, and that was directed towards potential customers to get them to come to the place of danger where Mr. Calhoun was ultimately victimized. So for the homicide offense, I think offense variable 10 should be scored at 15 points. And for the human trafficking offense, I think it should be 10 points because of the use of the domestic relationship and for youth and agedness to victimize the 17-year-old he was able to convince to engage in the human trafficking. So for offense variable 10, it'll be 10 points for human trafficking. Offense variable 11.
If we may, Judge, just put our objection to scoring a 10 on the record.
Okay. I thought you already did. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Offense variable 11, criminal sexual penetration. That doesn't apply. You all agree?
I don't believe it does.
I believe it applies to the human trafficking.
Oh, tell me more.
As it relates to offense variable 11, the human trafficking count actually is a range. It's not just one day. So when we're talking about 2 or more criminal sexual penetrations, during the trial, Ms. Baker testified that she had engaged in multiple acts of sex for money, sometimes multiple times during the day. I believe that should be appropriately scored at 50 points.
But don't they have to be sexual penetrations of the victim by the offender?
That's correct. We believe that only applies in the CSC case where there's a sexual penetration from defendant to victim. In this instance, there's sexual trafficking occurring, but however, it's not my client that's conducting the penetrations. It's Miss Baker who is selling her body in a sense, and other men are doing the penetration, not my client.
Ms. Lowe?
I tried to find case law as it relates to human trafficking and whether or not we could score OB11. There actually is no case law whether or not it should be scored where the offender is the person who's basically directing the victim to engage in criminal sexual penetrations. So I would leave it to the court.
Well, the penetrations are voluntary, that she's the one who's accepting money for the penetrations. We don't believe she was forced into those acts. However, I think it specifically requires that we generally call it the one poke rule, in which the first penetration is accounted and the remaining are for the sentencing offense. In this instance, my client is not the person conducting or doing the penetration, so we believe that scoring will be totally inaccurate.
All right. Well, the evidence that's on this record is that he did engage in sexual acts, and the jury even had this unfortunate, they had to see it, where he did in fact engage, he personally being your client. It was her testimony that he penetrated her and also performed had her perform a fellatio on him, which would be multiple penetrations. And I think if you look at the overall pattern of how he was able to human traffic her, I think, and I don't know if this is judicial fact finding. If it is, the Court of Appeals will tell me. But if you look at the overall pattern of the relationship that he engaged in with her in order to force her into the human trafficking, I think it would be appropriate to take into account the sexual acts that he committed upon her, because that's how he gains power, control, and authority over her in order to get her into the human trafficking. But we'll see what the Court of Appeals says. For now, as it relates to the human trafficking offense variable 11 will be scored at 50 points. For the homicide, of course, will be 0. Offense variable 12, contemporaneous felonious acts.
Should be 0.
0.
For both offenses?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Offense variable 13, continuing pattern of criminal behavior.
Properly stored as on file.
Mr.
We agree.
Longstreet? All right. Offense variable 14, offender's role.
Should be stored at 0.
For which offense?
Both of them.
All right. Well, I believe offense variable 14 should be scored at 10 points for the homicide. He clearly was the leader in a multiple offender situation. It's clear that he didn't hide this body or do any of the things that he did on his own. He had a second offender, although she got an immunity agreement in exchange for her testimony. She clearly was an offender that was involved in this death. And as the defense pointed out in their arguments, it's likely that we really don't know the truth about what happened to Mr. Calhoun, because Mr. Baskerville, she said Mr. Baskerville only shot once with one weapon, but the forensic evidence clearly showed that he was shot multiple times with a second weapon, which would tend to point towards the fact that she was also armed with the weapon and shot Mr. Calhoun too. So I am over the objection of both of you, really. I'm scoring offense variable 14 at 10 points for the homicide offense. Offense variable 16 doesn't apply. Do you all agree?
We agree.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, we talking about 16?
Yes.
16,
Should be
yes.
0.
Offense variable 17 doesn't apply. Do you all agree?
We agree.
I agree.
Offense variable 18 doesn't apply. Do you all agree?
Agree.
Agree.
Offense variable 19 also does not apply. Do you all agree?
Defense agrees.
And I disagree with
Okay,
the
tell me more.
homicide. As it relates to interfering with the administration of justice, we have a defendant here who clearly interfered with the administration of justice by hiding the crime scene. One, he took Mr. Calhoun's body, placed it in a Corville dumpster. Then he placed that Corville dumpster in the garage of an abandoned house 1 block over and closed the door. The intent was to hide this crime, to hide the fact that Mr. Calhoun was dead, even though the police were actively searching for him. Also, the guns are also nowhere to be found, which Ms. Baker testified that Mr. Calhoun got rid of the gun, even though she testified she only saw him with one gun.
Mr. Longstreet.
The defense would disagree with the prosecution's contention. I don't think there was any intent at the time to simply hide the body, not to interfere with the administration of justice, because the administration of justice had not begun yet. I think this is more appropriate if there is a resisting, obstructing a police officer or direct interference with a police investigation. That is not the case here, and we'd ask that that not be scored.
All right, well, you know, I once scored interference with the administration of justice and rendering of emergency services for someone who stole a cell phone, preventing the victims from being able to call 911 and get help, which I think is clearly interfering with the administration of justice and rendering of emergency services, because there's no pay phones anymore where anybody can call for help if their cell phones are taken from them. And you know, the Court of Appeals disagreed and said that that was not interference with the administration of justice and rendering of emergency services. It was just committing the crime of armed robbery. So I think the Court of Appeals would be likely to disagree if I score 10 points for him, for the defendant disposing of the murder weapon, hiding the body in order to evade detection of the crime. I think the Court of Appeals is likely to disagree, but we'll see. I'll score offense variable 19 at 10 points for the homicide offense only. Offense variable 20.
Should be 0.
Should be 0.
All right. So that brings 25 for offense variable 1, 5 for offense variable 2, 25 for offense variable 3, 15 for offense variable 5, 25 for offense variable 6, 10 for offense variable 9, 15 for offense variable 10, 25 for offense variable 13, 10 for offense variable 14, and 10 for offense variable 19. That makes his total OVs for the homicide offense 165.
I have that as well, Your Honor.
And for the human trafficking offense, 25 for offense variable 1, 5 for offense variable 2,
100 for offense variable
100 for offense variable 3, 10 for offense variable 4, 0 for offense variable 4, 2, 4 fifths variable 9, 10 4 fifths variable 10, 50 4 fifths variable 11, 25 4 fifths variable 13. That makes the score 235. And I know you all don't weigh any of the objections that you placed on the record. So his guidelines, I mean, you know, it doesn't change. They're still 315 to 1,050. Do you all agree?
We do. I agree. Well,
Well,
with
your
my objections, yes.
he's in an F down, so it's actually 365 to 1,200.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
365 to 1,200, he's in F3.
Oh, you're right. All right, what would you like to say on behalf of the people? I know you filed a memorandum requesting consecutive sentencing. You may.
Yeah, as it relates to how this has affected the victims in this matter, I don't think I can say more than Ms. Phillips, Mr. Swan, or Ms. Baker have already said. As the court noted, the people did file a request for consecutive sentencing as to count 1 and count 2, and namely that's because count 2 is human trafficking involving death, which presupposes that the only time this matters to the state of Michigan is when someone dies. But as the court heard through the testimony at the trial, Ms. Baker was being trafficked long before Mr. Calhoun was murdered. And that should be taken into consideration, and Mr. Baskerville should be held accountable for that. And as in my motion, I attached several exhibits to show the power and control that Mr. Baskerville exerted over Ms. Baker during this entire period, to show that he deserves to be held accountable for what he did to her as well. And I would rely on what's actually stated in my brief, and I would ask the court to sentence the defendant to the top of the guidelines and for consecutively as it relates to human trafficking involving death.
All right. Mr. Longstreet, you may.
In regards to my client, we believe that the trial truly did not bear out what actually happened inside of that house. And I actually believe no one will ever know what happened inside that house. We believe that Ms. Baker is not necessarily a victim in this case. She's also what we believe to be one of the shooters in this instance. We're asking that this court send my client to the bottom of the guidelines.
All right. Mr. Baskerville, you were convicted as the result of a jury trial, sir, and as so, you have the right to automatic appellate review of your conviction by a higher court. And so you don't have to say anything that would affect your chances to appeal if you maintain your innocence and wish to appeal this conviction to a higher court. But I have to tell you that you do have the right to speak if you wish to speak. But if you choose not to, I won't hold it against you, because I understand that you may be trying to seek appellate relief from this conviction, but I'm required to give you a chance to speak if you wish. Do you have anything to say, sir?
Thanks, Mr. Longstreet, for supporting me and being with me during this harsh time. Appreciate having a fair trial. That's it.
All right. Well, Mr. Baskerville, you know, I don't know what brought you to this point in your life. I don't know if this is true, but I heard, no, you can tell me if this is true or not, but that your brother also had a case where he was accused of assaulting your mom. Is that true? You know anything about that?
Yes. That deemed to be false, and he's home now.
Okay. So, you know, I don't know what happened to you in your life that brought you to this point, but I would imagine that there was a breakdown a long time ago in the way that you were raised and the home that you were brought up in that brought you to this point in your life. And I agree with Mr. Longstreet that we really are never going to know the truth about what happened in that house that day, because only you and Alexis really know the truth about what happened in that house that day and how it is that Mr. Calhoun came to be killed. But I don't believe that you acted alone. I think that the physical evidence clearly demonstrated that there were multiple weapons involved. None of the weapons were found. But, you know, I talked to the jury, and the jury felt that the most compelling evidence against you was your own words in the jail call. Don't say anything. You shouldn't say anything on that at this point. And you know, when you were on that jail call, the jury felt that when you called and said that if you keep talking, you're going to make yourself an accessory. And when you asked, "Did you tell on me?" that was the clearest admission of your own guilt and your own responsibility, and that's really what convicted you in this case, because she had every reason to lie and point the finger at you to save herself. And there really wasn't much evidence that directly linked you to the crime until you opened your own mouth on the jail calls. And perhaps you thought you were being real slick because you used somebody else's number to call, and that somebody else's inmate number, meaning you didn't call on your own account. You used somebody else's inmate number to call, and then you had somebody, whoever these random people were that you were calling, then used another phone to call Alexis and communicating through another person in that way. Maybe you thought that you would be able to get around the telephone call recording system, and I'm sure, you know, I don't know, you didn't have Mr. Longstreet as your lawyer at the time that you were making these calls. You had a different lawyer who ultimately withdrew from the case, but I hope that that attorney had already told you not to be talking on the phones at the jail. So I want you to know that it was your own words that hurt you the most in this case, according to the jury. You know the truth about what happened that day. And the truth about what happened that day is something that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. But you know, the most sad and disturbing part about all of this is, you know, you had a 17-year-old girl who was selling her body. And all these men, all of them, I wonder if they knew that they were coming to have sex with a child. I wonder if the advertisement showed that these men were coming to have sex with a child. You wonder how a 17-year-old girl finds herself in this situation where she's already got a child of her own. She has nowhere to live. She finds herself in the grasp and control of a man like you, who the evidence bore out controlled everything she did. You caught her on Facebook. The text message showed you caught her on Facebook and told her, get off Facebook before I come home and beat your ass. And she apologized and said all she did was post one picture and a status, and you said you didn't care, she needed to get off Facebook. I mean, you controlled everything that she did. And what was it about you that made you think you had the right to control someone else like they were your property? Slavery was abolished a long time ago. We as black people have been free in this country for a very long time. Yet you had this 17-year-old girl like she was your slave. She was at your direction doing what you wanted her to do. You know, had you simply said that you caught Mr. Calhoun sexually assaulting her, and you came to her aid and shot him because you were trying to prevent him from sexually assaulting her, you would have got away with this whole thing. Because dead men don't talk. And there would have been no one to say what really happened and why you really shot him. You would have got away with the whole thing. But instead you were too smart for your own good, and you decided to put him in that dumpster, put him in a house, and come up with a story that didn't make any sense. Well, I don't know. Again, I think something in your life had to happen where you got to this point where you felt that you needed to own and lord over somebody else like a piece of property. And I don't know who failed you. I don't know if it was your mom. I don't know if it was your dad. I don't know. But something had to go really wrong. And I think that you and Alexis both know the truth about what happened to Mr. Calhoun that day. And I don't think this jury ever heard the truth about what happened to Mr. Calhoun. But I think at some point you have to come to grips with the totality and the gravity of what you did. I mean, a man shot and he's killed, and then you take him and put him away like a piece of trash to rot. Someone who valiantly, you didn't know it at the time, served our country as a military veteran, and then he has to die like this. And what about that baby? I wonder why you and Alexis were never charged with any crimes for that child. I'm shocked that she still has custody of that child. Like, I don't know how, given what she's gone through, and here she stands today saying that she's suffering from, she's starving herself and self-mutilating, how she could be in any condition to raise that child. And I have a lot of fear for what that child's going to become. And all I can do is hope and pray that that little boy doesn't grow up to be like you, a monster who thinks that he can own another person and force her to sell herself, and who thinks that another human being can be shot and killed and thrown away like a piece of trash. You know, your guidelines are very high. I mean, I've never seen such guidelines. I've never seen the top of your guidelines is 1,200 months. You know what that is?
No.
That's 100 years. 100 years. 100 years. A sentence within your guidelines is a sentence that you could never serve. Because you're already, how many people live to be 100? I do think, Mr. Longstreet, I didn't give you a chance to response to our argument about consecutive sentencing, did I?
I'm asking that the sentence could be concurrent.
And your rational basis for that?
I mean, if the jury wanted him to serve life in prison, they found him guilty of murder 1. This is murder 2.
All right. Well, the law clearly says that consecutive sentencing statutes are to be liberally construed in order to achieve a deterrent effect. And that comes from People v. Kirkland, 172, Mishap 735, a 1988 case. And I think it's clearly within my discretion, and I think that in a case like this, where you have such an egregious crime of human trafficking, luring men to a house to have sex with a 17-year-old girl, led to someone's death, I think consecutive sentencing is appropriate. So it'll be the sentence of this court that for the count of murder in the 2nd degree, that you will be remanded to the Michigan Department of Corrections for no less than 60 years, no more than 60, I think I have to say, I don't know how this works when it's life. I think I still have to put a number on the end. I think I do.
Yes.
So I'm going to
Yes.
say 60 to 100, which would be still sentencing you within your guidelines for the offense of murder in the 2nd degree. And for the human trafficking offense involving death, it'll be the sentence of this court that you will serve a consecutive 60 years to 100 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, which basically means it'll be 120 years before you're eligible for parole. And for the other offense of child sexually abusive activity, which is also a life offense, it'll be the sentence of this court that you will serve I'll say 25 to 50 years for child sexually abusive activity, which is also a life offense. For the offense of child sexually abusive material possession, it'll be 1 to 15. For the felon in possession of a firearm, it'll be 1 to 5, and plus the 2 years for the felony firearm. The felony firearm will be consecutive. The human trafficking offense will be consecutive. The murder in the 2nd degree offense will run concurrent with all the other offenses. Does that make sense, Dawn? I missed count 4. Child sexually abusive material, I thought I said that.
No, she gave 60 years.
I missed count 3. Human trafficking of a minor. Yeah, that's the count I missed. That offense will be 25 to 50 years as well for the human trafficking of a minor. You have 341 days credit from the time of your arrest until the time of your conviction. You must complete sex offender treatment while you are in the Michigan Department of Corrections. You have to pay $476 in state costs, $130 in crime victims assessment, $1,300 in court costs, $400 in attorney's fees, no contact with Alexis Baker. And are there any funeral expenses?
There are, Your Honor. Ms. Phillips provided me with the receipt, which I'll show you, Mr.
I do have that. I'm sorry, I saw it.
Don, I've already paid for signing that.
$3,992 in restitution, but the reality is he'll be in prison for the rest of his life, so I don't know how he's going to be expected to pay any of these costs, fines, fees, or the restitution. You have to pay it within 56 days of today's date. The fines, costs, and fees, sir, or you will be assessed a 20% late fee. And what they'll do is, any money that gets put on your books, they'll take it to go towards that. But I don't, reality is Mr. Baskerville's had little to no family support in court. I don't recall, maybe his first court appearance, some family might have appeared on his behalf, but I know certainly since Mr. Longstreet, I appointed him to represent you, there's been nobody here for you.
All my family in Georgia.
So I don't know that there's going to be anybody to put any money on your books. But I hope, sir, that you can find some peace with what you've done and that you will make use of the time that you have in the Michigan Department of Corrections. You have 42 days from today's date to seek leave to appeal your conviction to a higher court. If you can't afford an attorney, won't be appointed for your court expense. I'm sorry, it's automatic appellate review because you were convicted by a jury, but you have to notify us in writing that you need an attorney to assist you. You got court-appointed counsel for your trial. I know you're going to need a court-appointed attorney for your appeal, so submit that paperwork right away, because the appellate attorney will go through everything that's happened and to make sure that you were treated fairly and that your trial was conducted fairly, and if there's relief that you're entitled to, that'll be the appellate attorney's job to try to get relief for you from a higher court. Once you have read and understood your appellate rights, you should sign it. There's nothing further that can please this man.
Let's go, Mr. Don't give us any.
All right, Mr. Greenwood, who's your client?